Okay, so welcome to Psych 101 General Psychology. This week we're talking about learning, and we already talked about the first part. We already talked about classical conditioning. So let's get to where we left off. We talked about operant conditioning. Okay, there are three forms of learning. Remember, there's classical conditioning, there's operant conditioning, and social learning. So we talked about classical conditioning. Today we're talking about operant conditioning. Operant conditioning sounds like it's complicated, but it's actually simpler than classical conditioning. Operant conditioning is simply learning the results from reinforcement and punishment. Okay? So to put it simply, you learn because you are rewarded. Rewards are one kind of reinforcement. You learn because you're rewarded for something. And you can also learn not to do something because you're punished. So we also learn from rewards and punishments. Here's an example. You know, you pull the lever on a slot machine, you get a reward. So you learn that pulling that lever leads to a reward. And what happens is you pull the lever more often. Okay, there's a slot machine right there, like the ones you see in any casino in Vegas or some other casino. Why do you think you keep going back to those? Okay, why do you think people play those things? It's for the reward. Without the reward, pulling that lever would be absolutely meaningless. Okay, there's a claw machine right there, another machine that, you know, you put your money in it, and you know, if you operate the claw correctly, you know, you win a prize, you get your reward. You put your money in the slot machine as well. Okay, but what's happening here? Okay, what's happening here is that you are being rewarded for spending your money on these machines. And what happens is that you don't always get rewarded. Sometimes you do. And we'll talk about how that works. But you can learn things because you're rewarded. Hopefully, you know, you go to class, for instance, you learn, you know, maybe you even have some fun. Maybe class is fun. You get an A, right? So hopefully you get rewarded and you continue to go to class, other classes, right? And eventually, hopefully you get that degree and that good job, okay? But there are those for whom class doesn't work out that way. They go to class, they find it boring, they don't learn much, they stop going, they fail, you know, so they don't get rewarded, they don't get reinforced, so they'll stop going. Okay, so operant conditioning is simply learning the results from reinforcement and punishment. Okay, and I need to tell you about Thorndike. Thorndike was one of these, we talked about behaviors before. Thorndike was one of these behaviors that believe that everything is learned. Okay, and Thorndike did several experiments where he demonstrated operant conditioning and how it works. He demonstrated that we can learn from rewards and punishments. Remember that these behaviorists, though, don't believe that thinking is necessary to understand behavior, okay? They don't care about what you're thinking about. And because of that, they used animals in research. So Thorndike liked to use cats. Thorndike developed this, this device called the puzzle box, and you can see an image right there. It's a box that's kind of like a puzzle. You put a cat in there, and the cat has to try to escape, has to figure out how to escape. And escaping from the box might be enough of a reward for the cat, but to give the cat a reward, let's say that there's a reward waiting outside. Let's say there's a bowl of food outside for the cat. So the cat has to try to escape, okay? So this puzzle box is just a box where the cat could escape by, let's say, pressing on a lever, pulling on a string, you know, or doing something like that that would open the box. The box opens, the cat gets out, and the cat gets rewarded with some food. Okay, so the cat was rewarded for food, with food for escaping, okay? And when the cat did manage to escape, you know, the cat would get rewarded, like I said, but then Thorndike would throw the cat back in there. Let's see if he can do it again, okay? The cat was rewarded for escaping, okay? So he did this over and over again, and you can see the graph there about how gradually the cat took less and less time to escape. According to Thorndike, cats were learning through what he called trial and error. In other words, he put the cat in there, the cat would try to escape, the cat would do what cats naturally do. It would claw, it would bite, thrash around, trying to get out. Eventually, it might pull on a string, maybe by biting on it or scratching at it, right? And then the box would open. It did that by accident, okay? It did some things that didn't work, and then just by accident, it happened to pull the string. Thorndike would throw the cat back in there. Okay, let's see if you can do it again. The cat would do the same thing, thrash around, scratch and bite, and then eventually pull the string again and get out. Except this time it was a little bit faster. He'd throw it back in there over and over again, and the cat got better and better at escaping. But according to Thorndike, the cat doesn't really understand anything. The cat is learning through trial and error. It's trying to find the solution by trying several things that don't work, and then by accident, just by chance, finding the solution. And because Thorndike threw the cat back in there and he noticed that the cat didn't go right to the string and pull it, right? That the cat would just do the same thing, same sequence of events and eventually pull the string. Thorndike believed that the cat really had no insight. The cat didn't really understand anything. The cats were learning through trial and error. And why did Thorndike do this experiment? Well, turns out he believes that we learn the same way. We also learn through trial and error. Sometimes we don't know what to do. And we'll try this, it doesn't work. We'll try that, that doesn't work. And sometimes, by chance, we find something that does work. And maybe it has to do with class, right? You go to class and you treat, let's say you go to college, right? And you treat college like it's high school. Maybe you don't pay much attention, you don't study, you don't read the book, and then you fail. Okay, so that didn't work. All right, let's try something different. Maybe this time you'll pay attention in class. You did that, but you still don't study, and that doesn't work either. You still fail. And then next time, well, maybe I'm going to pay attention, I'm going to do my homework, and I'm going to study, and maybe that works. So you happen to find the solution after, let's say, failing several times, right? Whereas if you understood, right, then you would try to do it the right way from the beginning if you had any insight. But according to Thorndike, we learn in this way too. Sometimes we do these things. We try to get away with doing the bare minimum, right? And we make mistakes, we fail, we'll try again, we'll get up, try again, try to do something slightly different, right? Dating, right? Do you really know what you're doing when it comes to dating? When you're young, probably not. So let me try this. Oh, didn't work out, got my heart broken. Let me try this other thing. Eventually you figure it out, hopefully. Some people never figure it out, but eventually you figure it out, and maybe you're better at it now. Maybe you know how to find a good relationship now, or how to find someone that's good for you. We have a tendency to just kind of stumble around in the dark, just like that cat at the beginning. And then by chance, we happen to find something that gives us a reward. That's what Thorndike is saying. We learn just like cats. We learn through trial and error. And through his experiments, Thorndike proposed what he called the law of effect. That's Thorndike right there. Thorndike said there's two things that the law of effect states. First thing is that behaviors followed by a satisfying state of affairs increase the probability of the behavior. So, for instance, if you do something and something good happens, you're more likely to do it again. That's what that says. Number two says behaviors followed by an unsatisfying state of affairs decrease the probability of the behavior. What that means is that if you do something and something bad happens, you're less likely to do it again. We already knew this. This is common sense. Why does Thorndike get credit for it? Why does he get to propose and publish the law of effect, right? It's because he demonstrated this with his experiments. That's why. It's one thing to say something, and, you say it's common knowledge. It's another thing to show it scientifically, experimentally, that things really are that way. That's what Thorndike did. Okay, so like I told you, right? So if you go to class and good things happen, you're more likely to continue to go to class. But if you go to class and bad things happen, you're less likely to go to class. If you try dating or try having a boyfriend or a girlfriend and something bad happened, you're less likely to try it again. You get your heart broken several times. After a while, you might say, forget this, right? I don't want anybody anymore. But if you date and good stuff happen, then you're more likely to continue doing that. That's what Thorndike said. That's the law of effect. Let's keep going. We have another individual that you need to know about, another behaviorist. His name was B.F. Skinner. Skinner, like Thorndike, also did experiments where he tried to demonstrate how operant conditioning works. But Skinner created what is called the operant conditioning chamber. It's also called a Skinner box, okay? But you have to also know it as the operant conditioning chamber. It's a device, a contraption. He would put an animal in there, maybe a rat or a pigeon. You see the image there, that one has a rat, okay? And the rat had to learn something to obtain a reward, or maybe the pigeon had to learn something to obtain a reward, okay? So this operant conditioning chamber, the Skinner box, is just a box in which a pigeon or a rat might have to learn to press a lever, peck on a key, do something in order to receive food. So Skinner created this contraption. If the rat presses the lever, a food pellet comes out through a little chute automatically, okay, if it presses the lever. Or if a pigeon pecks on, let's say, a green key, a green button that's lit or something, right? If it pecks on that, the pigeon will get maybe some food, some bird seed or something, and then the pigeon gets rewarded. If it pecks the red one, it doesn't get anything. The animals weren't just rewarded, by the way, for doing certain behaviors. The animals can also be punished. Notice that operant conditioning chamber. Notice the bottom, okay? It has metal rods on the bottom. If the rat should press on the wrong thing, it could get shocked. Or if the rat, or let's say that the electric shock turns on and the rat is getting shocked, the rat can press the lever to turn off the shock. So Skinner did these experiments with his operant conditioning chambers to show that animals can learn through rewards and punishments. And he's saying that we learn in this way too. And Skinner, with his experiments, demonstrated something known as shaping. Okay, shaping is learning that occurs gradually by reinforcing closer approximations to the desired behavior. I know that doesn't sound like much. Let me explain. Shaping is learning that happens little by little. As you get closer and closer to some more complex behavior. So how do we learn complex behavior? How do we learn, let's say, you know, what would be an example? How do we learn language? Little by little. We start off by just making some sounds. Then, you know, some random vowel sounds, oohs and ahs, and then we make consonant sounds. Then we start babbling, and then we start saying our first words. According to Skinner, all along the way, we're being rewarded for behavior that comes closer and closer to looking like language. That is shaping. Rats learn the same way. So do dogs. How do you teach your dog how to, you know, fetch a stick? You throw the stick out there, right? At first, the dog might just look at you like, what, right? You throw the stick again, and maybe this time the dog goes after it. Reward the dog for that, right? But, you know, throw the stick again. This time the dog chases it and grabs the stick, but doesn't give it to you. Well, go ahead and reward the dog for that. Eventually, little by little, you get that dog to chase the stick, pick it up, bring it to you, and drop it. So we learn things little by little, just like a dog, just like a rat, right? That's how we learn, according to Skinner, through shaping. This explains how simple behaviors can become complex behaviors. Skinner demonstrated that with his rats or his pigeons. He taught rats how to press levers to take away shock or to receive food. He taught pigeons to dance. He did all sorts of things. And he's demonstrating that we are the same way. We learn the same way. Here's a shaping example to make it easier for you guys to understand. Getting a rat to press a lever. Now, you might think pressing a lever is simple, right? That should be something you learn in one step. Well, not for a rat. For a rat, it's complicated. So you put the rat in the operant conditioning chamber, and the rat has to learn to press that lever. What is the rat gonna do? The rat doesn't know to press the lever. The rat doesn't know to go over there and press that lever. So what is the rat gonna do? The rat is gonna, walk here, walk there. Every now and then, the rat will stand up. Reward the rat for standing up. And what happens is when you reward the rat for standing up, the rat will stand up more often. Why do you reward the rat for standing up? Because it's going to need to stand to reach that lever. Okay? So reward the rat for standing up over and over again. Eventually the rat will know to stand up every time. Once the rat knows to stand up every time, don't reward it for just standing up anymore. Now the rat has to stand facing the lever. So the rat stands here, no reward. Stands there, no reward. When the rat stands in front of the lever, then you reward the rat for that. So the rat will stand facing the lever more often. Do that over and over again. Reward the rat for standing in front of the lever. Over and over again. Eventually the rat will know that it's, to stand and stand over here next to the lever. Once the rat has mastered that, no more reward for just that. Now the rat has to do more. Now the rat has to stand, face the lever, right, stand where the lever is and touch the lever. So the rat will stand in the lever, no reward. Stand the lever, no reward. Stand next to the lever, no reward. Eventually the rat will stand right next to the lever and will just by accident touch the lever. Rewarded for that. Over and over again. And the rat will understand. Stand here, right? Face the lever, touch the lever. Once the rat has mastered that, no more reward for just that. Now the rat has to do more. I know it looks kind of messed up there, but now the rat has to stand. In order to receive reward, the rat has to stand, face the lever, touch the lever, and then press the lever. Why would the rat do that? By accident, the rat's going to put his weight on the lever. If it's already learned to stand, face the lever, and touch the lever. When the rat presses that lever, you give it a reward. And you do that over and over until the rat knows to stand, face the lever, touch the lever, and push the lever every single time. And before you know it, you'll have that rat pressing on that lever so fast, it'll sound like it's typing. It wants its reward. You can't see what it says there. For some reason, it looks messed up. I'll look at the PowerPoint. I think the PowerPoint's okay. It's just maybe the presentation, it's messing it up a little bit. But it says there that Skinner believed that shaping explains language. We learn language little by little. We get rewarded all along the way for behavior that comes closer and closer to language. I explained that, right? According to Skinner, that's how children learn to misbehave. Children throwing a tantrum, child throwing a tantrum. What happens is that one day, let's say the child wants ice cream. And you as the parent says, no, I'm not giving you ice cream. So what does the child do? Child cries, right? The child cries. And you feel bad. So you said, fine, you can have some ice cream. You just rewarded that child for crying. Next time the child wants something, I want ice cream, let's say, right? You say, no, you can't have any ice cream. So the child cries. And you say, no, I'm not giving in this time. I don't care if you cry. I'm not getting ice cream. So the child not only cries this time, but the child throws himself on the floor. And it's really annoying, especially if it's in public. So you say, fine, you can have some ice cream. I'll buy you some ice cream. You just gave in to the child crying and throwing himself on the floor. And you can see how little by little that child gets more and more extreme. At first, just a little bit of complaining and then crying and then throwing himself on the floor and then throwing himself on the floor and screaming and crying, right? And it gets worse and worse. You are rewarding that child all along the way for behavior that gets worse and worse. You want to stop that behavior, stop rewarding the child, stop giving in. Ignore the child, walk away. Don't give in. Criminal behavior, according to Skinner, works the same way. A person isn't really born a criminal. A person doesn't just, isn't born and start stealing cars right away. They learn it little by little. First, the child might just, take a stick of gum, right? No big deal. Doesn't get caught. Gets rewarded with that gum, right? Then next time, the child takes the whole pack of gum. And then maybe next time he steals, let's say something worth more. Let's say the child steals, a whole box of cookies or something like that. Bigger reward, right? Before you know it, that child might be stealing, iPhones or something like that, and maybe even graduate eventually to cars. Little by little, according to Skinner, that's how it works. If you don't put a stop to the behavior, the child is going to get worse because they're getting rewarded for bad behavior. I have an example in my own family. I have a cousin. This guy has a lot of problems now. He's in and out of jail. How did he start out? Well, one day he took a dollar from his mommy's purse. Mom didn't even notice. So he got to steal $1, okay, and use it for something he wanted. Next time he took a 5. Mom did notice, but she didn't do anything. She probably thought, oh, it's okay. You know, he just wants to buy himself some chips or something. That's no big deal. She said nothing. She did nothing. And then he took a 20. And she still did nothing. Oh, it's okay. He probably just wants to go to McDonald's and get something to eat. It's okay. He's a good boy, right? One day she was missing $500. Because back then some people would pay their bills in cash. So they would get cash and they'd go to the bank. Sometimes they'd pay the bill or go to the electric company, go to the offices, pay the bill there. Go to the trash company, pay the bill there. And they would sometimes pay their bills in person. Well, he took all the money that she had for the bills. Then she did notice. She said something, but by that time it was kind of too late and she didn't really punish him. She didn't call the cops on him. She didn't get him thrown in jail or anything like that. She forgave him. Well, he got worse and worse. Ended up breaking into people's homes later on, including our house, and stealing things, money and things for him to sell. He's probably on drugs by then too. You know, and eventually was stealing cars too. And now he's in and out of jail. Steal stuff, you know, probably to finance his drug habit. And according to Skinner, he could have been stopped early on if he just would have been punished. You know, he would have stopped the reward, right? Of that, you know, the reward from that bad behavior. That's how it works according to Skinner. He's partly right and partly wrong. Rewards and punishments do matter, but there's something else that is missing that speeds up the learning. And that's the last form of learning that we'll talk about. That's social learning. Here's some pictures for you guys. That's Skinner in his Skinner box. And in that case, I think there's a pigeon in that Skinner box. And there's a bear riding a motorcycle. How do you think a bear learns to ride a motorcycle? Through shaping. Little by little, that bear has been taught to ride that motorcycle. Through shaping, gradually, little by little. At first, they just got the bear to sit on the motorcycle, or maybe to touch it. Then they got the bear to put his paws on the handlebars. And eventually just, you know, ride that motorcycle. Probably took dozens or maybe who knows how many steps, okay? It's not as easy as it seems. But that's something you might see at the circus, or a tiger jumping through a flaming hoop. How do you think they do that? Shaping. Skinner and his colleagues, actually, Skinner's the main one, his graduate students, are the ones who figured out how to train animals. And that's what actually made them rich. Not psychology, but the application of that. And they taught people to do that. Okay, but imagine if a bear can learn to ride a motorcycle, imagine what you can learn. Aren't you smarter than the average bear? Right? You're smarter than that. When I was a kid, I thought I would never learn to drive a car. It just seems like too dangerous, right? Too complicated. It's easy, okay? Oh, I could never write that research paper. It's not that bad. Just follow the rules, little by little, okay? Same thing with math. Little by little. Simple math becomes more complicated math. And it builds on itself. And before you know it, you're doing complicated stuff, if that's what you like to do, if that's what you decide to major in. That's what Skinner demonstrated, right? Same way a dog can learn to catch a frisbee or fetch, a bear can learn how to ride a motorcycle, you can learn all sorts of things. You learn how to dance, right? You learn how to write papers, you learn how to do math, how to drive cars, right? It's all shaping according to Skinner. Even your bad behavior, criminal behavior, right? All that is through shaping according to Skinner. Let's speak more about operant conditioning. Let's talk about reinforcement and punishment more specifically. What do we really mean by reinforcement and punishment? Well, reinforcement is actually anything that increases the probability of the behavior. And reinforcement actually comes in two forms. There's positive reinforcement and negative reinforcement. And they both increase the probability of the behavior. Positive reinforcement is when you do something and something good happens as a result. Positive reinforcement, for instance, is like when you work and you get paid. Positive reinforcement is like what we think of as a reward. You're, nice to your girlfriend, let's say, and she gives you a kiss. That's positive reinforcement. It makes it so you're more likely to be nice again. Why do you get paid? Because they want you to keep working. You do something, they pay you, you come back, right? And you work some more, and then they pay you again. That's positive reinforcement. Without the reinforcement, you would stop going to work. Okay? Negative reinforcement is when you remove something unpleasant. So negative reinforcement is when you do something and something bad gets taken away. So you do your chores, let's say, and what happens is mom stops nagging at you. Something bad is taken away. Or negative reinforcement might be, let's say you're caught speeding and you get a ticket. So what do? You go to driving school and they take away that point on your driving record so that your insurance doesn't go up. That's negative reinforcement. You do this, you go to driving school, and we won't report this to your insurance. That's really what it means. We'll take away that point that we would report to the insurance. With driving, you know, the DMV or driving in general, they use positive, negative reinforcement, and they even use punishment. They use positive reinforcement, you know. If you drive well, you know, you have a good driving record, you know, well, you get to continue driving. That's your reward, right? And you also get to go wherever you're going, right? If you drive badly, you get punished. Punishment is anything that decreases the probability of the behavior. Punishment makes behavior less likely. It decreases the behavior. So if you speed, let's say, you get pulled over and you get a ticket, that is punishment. Or if you insult your girlfriend, she slaps you, that's punishment. You don't study and you get an F on the exam. That's punishment for not studying, okay? Punishment basically is something bad. And by the way, do not get punishment confused with negative reinforcement. A lot of people do, a lot of students do. Negative reinforcement is actually something good. With negative reinforcement, they take away something bad. Negative reinforcement makes it more likely you'll do that again. Punishment is something that makes it less likely that you'll do that again. So if you don't study and then you get an F, right, you get punished, that makes it less likely that you won't study next time. So it makes it more likely that you will study. But if you study and you get an A, you get a reward, that's positive reinforcement. You need to know the difference among these. I'm going to ask you on the exam. I'll give you examples of each. Okay? So know the difference and do not get negative reinforcement confused with punishment. There's more. Okay? With operant conditioning, we also have acquisition. We have extinction. We have stimulus generalization, stimulus discrimination, just like we do with classical conditioning. Acquisition, remember, that's where learning takes place. Acquisition for operant conditioning is the process by which we learn to associate a behavior with reinforcement. Acquisition is when we associate the behavior, what we do, with something good. So as an example, you put money in the claw machine, let's say, or maybe in a slot machine, let's say, but a claw machine, right? You win a prize. So you learn that, hey, putting some money in the claw machine gets you a prize. So what do? You do that again. Next time you have a chance, right? You do it again. And the same thing with the slot machine, right? You learn that putting your money in that machine could lead to a reward. So when you acquire the behavior, you associate basically the behavior with the reinforcement. And then that makes it that you're going to do it again. You're going to try it again. Okay. Extinction is when we get rid of the behavior. Extinction, when it comes to operant conditioning, occurs if the behavior stops producing reinforcement. If you do something and you don't get reinforced, something good doesn't happen, right? Then you'll stop doing it. If you put money in the claw machine and you don't get a prize, right? If that happens over and over again, eventually you'll stop. You'll stop putting money in that machine. It must happen repeatedly for the behavior to stop. Or you put money in the slot machine and you don't get a reward. You do it again, no reward, no reward. If it happens over and over again, you will stop putting money in that machine. You will stop doing that. However, as you know, when you play these games, right, with a claw machine or you use the slot machine, they give you a reward every now and then. And that keeps you coming back. For extinction to occur, you must perform the behavior and you get no reward, no prize, and it must happen over and over again. But if it happens again every now and then that'll just keep reinforcing the behavior. That'll be acquisition. So extinction, we need it to be consistent, right? We need the reward not to occur. Okay, put money in the machine, no reward. Money in the machine, no reward. Over and over again for it to stop. And if you're addicted, by the way, to gambling, and that's what slot machines are, and even those claw machines, that's like gambling too. If you're addicted, it's going to take a long time. We also have stimulus generalization and stimulus discrimination with operant conditioning. Stimulus generalization, remember, is when you, it's when you do something and when you do something similar. Okay, let me explain for operant conditioning. I'll just read you the definition, then I'll explain. Okay, because I was going to give you the class conditioning explanation, but that's not what I should do here. Stimulus generalization is when you respond to a similar stimulus with the same behavior. So generalization, basically, you respond the same way. That's what it means, to something that is similar. So hey, you put your money in a vending machine, right? And you put your money in the vending machine, you get a treat, some food or something like that. You get rewarded, right? That is similar to putting your money in the claw machine. It's similar to putting your money in the slot machine. It's a big boxy machine that you put money in. And it gives you something. The vending machine gives you something every time, assuming it works. The claw machine, not every time. The slot machine, not every time. But it's stimulus generalization. It is similar to that vending machine. Guess what? You were trained on that vending machine, or maybe that claw machine. And then you go to Vegas and you see something similar. And guess what you're going to do? Put your money in it, pull that lever. It's similar to a vending machine. It's similar to a claw machine. So you respond very similar to those different machines because they are similar. You respond with the same behavior. Stimulus discrimination is different. That's when you respond to something that is different with a different behavior. Like the refrigerator. It's a big box as well with treats inside. But this time, you don't put money in it because it's different. It's different enough. You open the door and you get your treat. You don't put money in it. So that's stimulus discrimination. It's a different machine that you respond differently to. But guess why vending machines and claw machines and slot machines are all similar, right? Because you're being trained to put your money in them in order to get something. And then you do that with the claw machine, right? Every now and then you might get something in the slot machine, right? It's a raw deal. You put your money in it over and over again, and only once in a while do you get a treat. Not all the time, not like the vending machine. But they've been training you all along, so to speak. They know what they're doing. Let's keep going. Let's talk about schedules of reinforcement. How is it that they reinforce you, right? On what schedule? How often? How often do they need to reinforce you so that you keep coming back? You can have continuous reinforcement and partial reinforcement. Continuous reinforcement is when you get reinforced, or let's say you get rewarded every time you perform the behavior. Continuous reinforcement would be maybe like the vending machine, or maybe like your refrigerator. Every time you put money in the vending machine, you get your reward, you get your snack. That's continuous reinforcement. Assuming it always works. Once in a while it fails, but it almost always works. Okay, that's continuous reinforcement. Or basically, you open the refrigerator door, you get your snack. It's continuous, right? Every time you open that refrigerator, you get something to eat. That's the way that works. Okay, but there's also partial reinforcement. And this is what Vegas uses. This is what is used for those claw machines. That's what they use at the arcade. With partial reinforcement, Sometimes your behavior is rewarded, sometimes it's reinforced, and sometimes it's not. So when you put your money in that slot machine or that claw machine, sometimes you get rewarded, sometimes you don't. That is partial reinforcement. Guess which one of these is addicting? Partial reinforcement is addicting. Not continuous reinforcement. With continuous reinforcement, you know what to expect. Every time you put your money in the vending machine, right, it gives you a treat. If the vending machine should fail to give you a treat at some point, if it doesn't work, guess what? Screw you, vending machine. I'm not using you again, right? You can easily quit that, okay? But with partial reinforcement, sometimes they reward you, sometimes they don't. They keep you guessing. And you know what happens? You get addicted. You keep coming back. Because partial reinforcement is addicting. Partial reinforcement is like that bad girl or that bad boy you get addicted to. Sometimes they treat you nice. Sometimes they're mean to you. Sometimes they reward you. Sometimes they don't. And what happens is you get hooked on them. They are unpredictable. They are mysterious. You think, oh, I don't, I know he's bad sometimes, but I just can't help it. I'm really drawn to him. There's something about him. You know what it is? You're addicted to him or to her. They are using partial reinforcement. They're keeping you guessing. They keep you coming back. That's exactly what Vegas is doing. Continuous reinforcement is like that nice guy who's always nice. You know what you say about him? He's desperate. He's a loser. As soon as he screws up, he's gone. You don't get addicted to him. Partial reinforcement is addicting. And that's exactly what they do with those vending machines. You put money in it. Sometimes you get a reward. Sometimes you don't. Right? You keep putting money in it, thinking one of these times you're going to win. And you keep doing it. And if you keep doing it, you're going to get hooked. You're going to get addicted. Just like if you keep seeing that bad boy or that bad girl, you're going to get hooked. And before you know it, you can't quit them, so to speak. And you keep coming back, even though they're treating you bad. You keep going back to those slot machines, even though that slot machine is treating you bad. You keep putting money and money into it. And every now and then it spits out a little something. You're losing money. That's how they make money. They will reward you a lot less than you play. I've tried it out. And you know what I found? They reward you about 1 of every 20 times is what I found in my experience. That is really awful. Every now and then you might win something, but you lost plenty already. And even if you win more than you put in, you're going to keep doing it. And what happens over time is you end up losing a lot more than you earn. That's how they make their money. It doesn't matter, by the way, if it's the slot machines or you're playing the roulette or it's a card game. It's the same thing. It's partial reinforcement. Sometimes you win, sometimes you lose. They keep you coming back. And in the long run, you lose more than you gain. That's how they make their money. They make a lot of money, millions of dollars. That's how they build all those bunch of casinos. They make more money, they build more casinos. Put in more slot machines. Make more money. You're a fool for going to Vegas, okay, to put it bluntly. That's how it works. Let's say more about partial reinforcement, okay? Partial reinforcement comes in different forms. There's different ways in which you can be rewarded partially, where you don't get rewarded all the time. There is fixed ratio reinforcement, where you get rewarded after a fixed amount of times. So let's say every time you pull the lever on a slot machine, every fifth time you get your reward, let's say. So fixed ratio means that you have to perform the behavior a fixed amount of times to get rewarded. You pull the lever on the slot machine 5 times, you get a reward. Pull it another 5 times, you get another reward, right? Another 5 times, you get another reward. That would be as if the slot machine was rigged, right? To give you a reward every 5th time. That would be fixed ratio reinforcement. That's not the way slot machines work, right? But that's an example of fixed ratio reinforcement. Fixed ratio reinforcement is also like when you, for instance, work on commission. You sell a house, you get paid. You sell something, let's say you get paid, right? In this case, you're getting paid every time you sell something, all right? So it sounds like it's continuous reinforcement, but it's also fixed ratio because it's after a certain amount of times. It's always 1. okay? But another example would be like, for instance, let me move on to the next thing. Let me give you a different example. The example I had in mind is actually variable ratio. Let's talk about variable ratio. Variable ratio is when you get rewarded, you get reinforced after a variable amount of times. So it keeps changing on you. So you perform the behavior, right? Let's say 2 times and you get a reward. Next time, it might have to be 5 times, 10 times before you get the reward again. That's variable ratio reinforcement. That's the way the slot machines work. I mean, you might win after the first try, after the 5th try, after the 10th time. It's not always going to be the same. It's variable. And that is what is addicting, that variable ratio reinforcement. Okay? It's also like when you, if you play the lottery, pick your numbers, play the lottery, you don't win. Play a bunch of times, every now and then you might win a little something. It's not always going to be after the second time or the 3rd time. If you're talking about hitting the jackpot, that probably will never happen for most people, okay? But let's say you're buying lottery tickets, those scratchers, right? You're going to win every now and then. But it's not going to be every 2nd time or every 3rd time. It's going to be, you know, after the 5th time, after the 10th time, every now and then, you'll get a winning ticket. That's variable ratio reinforcement. And that is addicting. That's exactly the same as gambling. Let's keep going. There's also fixed interval reinforcement and variable interval reinforcement. This is still partial reinforcement. Fixed interval means you get rewarded after a fixed amount of time has gone by. So it's still partial reinforcement. You don't get rewarded all the time. After a certain amount of time goes by, that's when you get your reward. It's exactly how work is. You go to work, after a month, you get paid. Work another month, you get paid again. That is fixed. It's after every month. By the way, it used to be after 2 weeks. It used to be after a week. When I was a kid, they used to pay people at the end of the week. And you get paid at the end of the week. And then they made it 2 weeks. And then now they make it a month. You have to keep track of your finances. They make you wait longer to get your reward now. And you have to manage your money better. And it's more annoying to wait longer. So work sucks even more now. It takes longer to get your reward. But that's fixed interval, okay? What are they doing? They're keeping the money longer, earning more interest on the money. You know, the money, if it's a big corporation, they have tons of money, millions or even billions in the freaking stock market, in several different things that are earning money. They make you wait longer to get your damn money. And in the meantime, they're growing that money. That's fixed interval. Fixed interval would also be like, let's say you cook some Jell-O, let's say, and after 30 minutes, it's done. You get rewarded, all right? You cook your Jell-O again, and 30 minutes later, it's done again, right? Every single time, it's the same. By the way, I don't know how to cook Jell-O. Not my thing, right? I'm just giving you an example, but it's fixed interval, okay? You get rewarded after a fixed amount of time. And the perfect example is getting paid for doing a job, okay? Most people get paid that way. If you get paid on commission, that's different, by the way. That's fixed interval. I mean, fixed ratio. When you see the word interval, that has to do with time. When you see the word ratio, it has to do with how many times, okay? Variable interval is basically when you get rewarded after a changing amount of times. It keeps changing on you. It would be like pop quizzes. Assuming that you are, for instance, studying, when there's a pop quiz, you get rewarded with an A, right? Well, when's the next pop quiz? Is it a week later, 2 weeks later? It's going to keep changing. It's a pop quiz. If you got paid based on a variable interval schedule, that would be weird. It would be like sometimes your boss pays you after a week, sometimes after 2 weeks, sometimes after a month. That's a pretty shady boss, by the way. He keeps changing it on you. Oh, I don't have the money. I'll pay you next week, right? Oh, yeah, I have the money this time. I'll pay you now. Oh, I don't have the money. I'll pay you next month, right? That would be variable interval. I actually knew someone who worked for a boss that was like that. It's kind of shady, though. You know, wouldn't pay the employees regularly. It would vary. but that's variable interval. Know about this, okay? No examples. It's going to be on your exam. Let's keep going. Let's talk. Oh, here's a figure for you, or actually a graph there that shows you, you don't have to write all that down. I'm not going to explain it, but it just shows you the rate of responding for each type of reinforcement. See, variable racial reinforcement, the steeper the line, the faster you respond, right? The more you keep working. When you keep working, when you get paid on commission, the more you work, the more you get paid. So there it is. You can see the curve is pretty steep. The little lines, the horizontal lines are when you get rewarded. And you just keep working at a steady rate, pretty hard. Same thing with fixed ratio. Okay? You work pretty consistently, but you get rewarded, you know, based on what you produce. Okay? So when you get paid based on what you produce, whether it's fixed or it varies, you work pretty hard. The curves are pretty steep. When you get paid based on time, it's different. You don't work as hard. The curve has a shallower slope, okay? Look at variable interval, right? Pretty steady rate of responding, but the curve is not as steep, meaning you don't work as hard when they pay you based on time, even if that time varies. Fixed interval is very interesting. Remember the little lines there that are kind of going sideways are the ones that, the little ones, the short ones, that's when you get reinforced. So this is the way fixed interval works, okay? This is what happens. You work for a month, you get paid. Immediately after you get paid, you slack off and you don't work very hard. So you can see it's kind of flat right there. And then when you start getting closer to the end of the month, you start working harder because you don't want to get fired and you want to get paid. And then you get paid again and you slack off again. And then when it comes closer to payday, you start working hard again. That's what happens. That's the way people are. That's the way rats are, by the way, as well, too, when they get rewarded based on time. That's the way politicians are. Politicians work really hard to get elected. And then they get elected and they don't do squat. They sit on their asses. They don't do much. But then when it starts getting close for re-election, right? When they have to get elected again, when they have to run again, all of a sudden you'll see that they'll start doing this and that. They pass this thing. They work on this thing. So they can tell you, look at all I've done. Re-elect me again. Reward me again. You elect them again, and then they slack off again. And only when it comes close to election time do they start doing stuff and do they start telling you, oh, look, I did all this stuff. That's what's happening right now with these politicians. That's the way people are in general. And rats and animals, when you reward people based on time, we get rewarded, we immediately slack off. We know the next reward is coming a month from now, a week from now, whenever it is. So in the meantime, we're going to take it easy. When the reward is coming, when it gets closer, we start acting as if we deserve it. Okay? And then we get it, and again, we slack off. That's the way people are. You guys, I can tell you guys, right? You guys have hardly been doing squat, right? And then what happens? There's an exam coming up. Oh, I better do my homework. I better start studying. You get rewarded, right? Have the exam. Maybe you get a good score. What happens right after? You slack off again. Again, you don't do squat until it's time to get close to the next exam. Remember, there's also a paper. When the date of the paper starts getting closer, you'll start working on it more, right? That's exactly how people are. All right, there's one form of learning left to talk about. And, you know, we have less than half an hour left, but this one doesn't take that long at all. Social learning. It doesn't take that long to explain because we actually already talked about a lot of things that have to do with it. But what we have to know about social learning is that social learning is when you learn through observation. It still involves rewards. It still involves punishments. We already talked about those. But social learning is when you learn by watching others. I told you guys that Skinner was partly right and partly wrong when he said that you learn criminal behavior through rewards and punishments. You learn language that way, misbehavior that way. He is right. Rewards and punishments do matter. But he's also partly wrong. You also need social learning. Social learning speeds up learning. If you watch someone, if someone demonstrates language, you'll learn language faster. If someone demonstrates criminal behavior, you'll learn criminal behavior much faster. So social learning is when you learn by watching others. Albert Bandura is the biggest name in social learning. Okay. So social learning involves modeling. Somebody demonstrates the behavior. That's the model. Okay? Why do you think they call those people on TV models? They demonstrate behavior. Oh, look, I'm wearing this nice outfit. Why don't you go buy it? Or look, I am driving this car. Go buy one. That's what they're telling you. They demonstrate the behavior and they want you to copy it. So it involves modeling, demonstrating the behavior, and it involves imitation. You copy the behavior. Those that are attractive and successful, we're more likely to imitate those people. And that's why you see good-looking people on TV. That's why you see good-looking people on ads and billboards. You're more likely to copy them than someone who's not attractive, someone who you don't like. Okay? And by the way, it's more useful to learn how to swim, how to drive, a lot of different things through imitation. I mean, through social learning. Yeah, imitation, social learning. Okay? Guess what? Swimming, if you've never seen anybody do it and you throw yourself in there, you're probably going to drown. It's useful if you learn somebody do it first and then you try what they do. Driving, first driving lesson, you don't even get to drive. You sit there and your dad or your mom tells you, look at what I'm going to do, right? All right. I put my hands here. Here's the shifter. I'm going to put it in drive, right? I'm going to let go of the brake. I'm going to hit the gas. And when I want to go this way, I turn this way. It's actually easy, by the way. But your first driving lesson, usually you don't really get to drive. You observe, and then you get to try it, right? And that's social learning. That's how you learn how to read also and how to write. People are showing you. They're demonstrating things. You are learning right now through social learning. Even though we're not live, I'm explaining things to you. This is social learning. You're learning through me. If you were reading a book, you're still doing social learning. If you're watching a video, a YouTube video, on how to fix something or whatever it is, that is all social learning. It's when you learn by watching others or by reading about others, reading about things. That is social learning. In other words, you don't have to experience the thing yourself in order for you to learn about it. You can read about it, watch something about it, hear about it. You can learn that way too. It speeds up learning. It still involves reinforcement and punishment, but now it's vicarious. Vicarious means that you kind of live through somebody else. Vicarious reinforcement is when you substitute somebody else's reward for your own. Vicarious reinforcement is basically when you watch somebody do something, they get rewarded, and then you think, oh, I'm going to do the same thing. I want the same thing to happen to me. You observe somebody getting a new car, they get lots of attention. So you think, wow, you know what? I want a new car too. Then you try to get yourself a new car, and then you get the attention, right? You hear about people going to college, getting degrees and getting good jobs afterward. And you think, maybe I should go to college too. That's why you're here, right? You've heard about it. It's your best shot at a good life is by going to college. If you weren't born rich, this is your best shot. Yeah, you can try to start a business, do something else. Most businesses fail. You're more likely to fail with that. College is your best shot. So you should take it seriously. Learn from others, right? Work hard, right? Do the right things. Hopefully you'll get a reward. The problem is the reward comes much later. But you've heard about it, right? That's vicarious reinforcement. Vicarious punishment. You can also learn from other people's mistakes, from other people's punishment. Substitute somebody else's punishment for your own. You observe that somebody is always smoking weed at work, getting high at work, right? They get caught, they get fired. So you decide that you're not going to do that. You're going to leave your weed at home, right? Because you learn from that person's mistakes. You hear about all sorts of people getting punished. You hear about people not studying and failing, people dropping out of college. You hear about people not getting, not protecting themselves when they have sex. You hear about people getting pregnant, people getting STDs. You should learn from those people. That's vicarious punishment. We shouldn't just learn from people's rewards, but also from their punishment. It's hard for us to learn through punishment, though, because very often we think we're the exception, right? We think that somehow we will be the ones who don't have to study and will still pass, that we're going to be different. Or we're the ones who can have unprotected sex and everything will be okay, right? Or we're the ones who can use drugs and it's not going to ruin your life. Learn from other people's mistakes, okay? But it's harder to learn from other people's mistakes because we often think that we're special, that things are different for us, that we're not going to get caught. It's not going to happen to us. Here's an experiment that Bandura did to demonstrate social learning. It's very simple. Children were exposed to a model that was attacking a Bobo doll. Here's some images for you here, right? You can see there that Bobo doll, big inflatable thing. It was popular in the 50s, some toy, big inflatable thing. You punch it or you kick it, it goes down, it pops right back up. That's a Bobo doll, okay? So children watched, this was on a film, in a video. Children watched the video of a model, and in this case it was a woman, attacking Bobo doll, punching it, kicking it, throwing it up in the air, hitting it with a hammer, right? Those were the children in the experimental group. They were being exposed to aggressive behavior. Other children watched a film of a model that was not attacking the Bobo doll, that was not behaving aggressively. That is the control group. Those are the ones that were exposed to zero aggressive behavior. After that, children were left alone with their own Bobo doll. What do you think happened? It's obvious. Children in the experimental group were the most aggressive. The children that saw the model punching, kicking, hitting the Bobo doll did the very same things. It implies that children copy aggressive behavior. You need to be good role models for your children if you have children, for other people. Behave yourself. People are watching and they're going to copy you. Where do you think children get those ideas from? You know, the drinking and the smoking and the cussing. Many times it's their own parents who do that stuff, right? You smoke and you expect your kid not to smoke. You drink, you expect your kid not to drink, right? They also learn it from their friends, by the way. That's all, you know, social learning from their friends. Eventually, they care more about what their friends do and what they think than what you think as a parent. When they become adolescents, you become less and less of a reference for them, less and less of an example, because they care more about people their age. But they learn from others, and they also learn from you. And you know, we teach children all this stuff. Bandura said that a lot of the evil that we see in society, children learn from watching others. We need to behave ourselves, right? We need to demonstrate good behavior. We need to create TV programming, shows that don't show sex and that don't show aggressive behavior, don't show people getting blown up or things like that. But that's exactly what we see on TV. And children are watching this. They watch drug use, sex, aggressive behavior. Bandura thinks all that is very evil. We're showing our children that they can do the same thing. Here's the image, right, that I already showed you guys, but here it is again. You can look at it more now. There's the model at the top, right? A woman in a skirt there, punching a Bobo doll, throwing it up in the air, you know, punching it, kicking it, right? And then the children at the bottom. It shows a boy doing the same thing, exactly the same thing. The girl as well. Girls will also behave aggressively. The boys were more aggressive overall, by the way, but it shows that children will copy bad behavior, aggressive behavior. And you know what the sad thing about this thing is? The model wasn't even rewarded. She didn't get a reward for doing this, and the children still copied it. You do not have to get rewarded for the behavior to be copied. You can demonstrate awful behavior that doesn't lead to anything good, and the children will still copy it because they don't know any better. And the last slide is just our references. You're seeing plenty of examples of citations and references. Hopefully by the time your paper is due later, right, you will have an idea of how to cite and how to reference, although I will explain it at some point. Okay, that is where I'll stop.